welcome to another edition of Voices of the West. We are out here live and on location today with author Mark C. Jackson, who is a musician, a poet, and writer of historical fiction. So, a wide variety of things we're hitting up there. Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Oklahoma. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I still go back there quite often. I'm going back next month. My mother still lives in the same house that I grew up in. And out of there, I went to school for a while and then joined the Navy. And I spent all my 20s in the Navy. And I can say that at 26, I'd been completely around the world and traveled in the East and the West. And lived in Europe for a while. My last duty station was in Sardinia, Italy. That's where my son was born. And got back to San Diego in '89 and decided to settle down and got a job in a factory and just kept, I ground that out for 31 years and recently retired in 2020. Excellent. And that whole time raising kids and, my wife and I have been together for 37 years.
Excellent.
I did music here in San Diego. I had a band of my own for many years, and I guess my claim to fame is I've been nominated for 7 times for the San Diego Music Awards. Never won, but I KUSI one time I said I was the Susan Lucci of the San Diego Music Awards.
Always close but never quite.
Always close but never quite, and today I still play. I'm in a trio called Outliers. And, a couple of good friends. It's an acoustic trio, a couple of guitars, and 3 vocals. And, in fact, we're playing coming up. We're playing in Humphreys backstage.
Oh, very nice.
So you being a San Diegan, you probably
definitely
know that venue.
Appreciate that venue very well. Yes, yeah. Coming from Point Loma, basically that was our back door for everything, and
That's
sit out there
right.
in kayaks and watch everybody play.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I won't be on the main stage. We'll be inside, but it's still nice to play. I've never played there before. So.
Good.
And it's in conjunction with Earth Day, which is a good cause.
Excellent.
So I'm doing that, and then I'll just keep on. You want me to just keep on, or you got any questions?
Tell me a little bit here about exactly how did you get into Westerns of all things? I mean, Oklahoma certainly makes sense. But
yeah, it does. Well, I never intended to be a writer. I mean, I kind of fell into it. I wrote a song about my grandmother and her 2 sisters, and they were outlaws in Oklahoma. And from there, I had this grand idea of writing it into a play. So what I had to do is I had to go take some classes. So I went to San Diego Writers Inc., which is a really fine organization, and I took a couple of classes, one in dialogue, and which to write plays you need to understand how to write dialogue. But I ended up taking this class in flash fiction, and to this very day, I don't know why I did. And I needed one last story, and I remembered a dream that I had many years before, in my 20s, of me being a scout on the prairie, and I was responsible for getting this group of people across the prairie to safety. And so I wrote that as a short story. That's literally how I found my character, Zebadiah Creed. And it's called The Hanging, and in fact, it's in development to make a film out of it by some local filmmakers here in San Diego. Screenplay's been written. But that was the beginning, and it got such, I'd never written prose before. I was 54 years old, I think, 2011 when that happened. And it got such a good reception that I just kept writing. And so I wrote a second story with Zebadiah Creed. The hanging took place in 1846. So I wrote a second story, and for some wild reason I placed him in New Orleans and in 1835. And so I just kept writing. And then I met Chet Cunningham, who we were just talking about, local writer. When he passed away in 2017, 375 published books of all types. He could write a book, and he was tasked one time to write a 25,000 word book in a week. And he barricaded his doors and told his family, says, "You won't see me for a week." And so he became my mentor, because once I met him, and he invited me into his writers group. And I was originally just going to write a series of stories, the Tales of Zebadiah Creed, right? Mm-hmm. And I started on the first one, and they said, "No, you started out in New Orleans," or the second one, not the hanging, but I called it the Zeb Goes to New Orleans. That's an intriguing title, isn't it?
Good classic original.
Good classic original, yeah. And so, working with those folks, I was in amongst published writers by this time. Mm-hmm. And so they said, "No, you need to take this and write a book, or at least write his story completely." And that's what I did. And through Chet, I ended up finding out about Western writers of America. Mm-hmm. And went to my first conference in 2014. I tried to go in 2013, and I asked Chet, I said, "Am I ready for this?" And he says, "No." So I kept writing and, learning the craft. Mm-hmm. And so 2014, I was deemed ready to show up, and that's through them I found could be seen now and actually promote something that I had. I was actually a writer. For a while I wasn't a writer. I was just hacking my way through. And that's where I met Tiffany Schofield of 5 Star Publishing, and she loved the title. She loved Zebadiah Creed, and she liked the premise of the story. It's a revenge story. And
those always sell well.
Those always sell well. It's an eye for an eye. That's the first book, so it's definitely a revenge story. And then I just, I followed through. Finished the first book, got the manuscript done the next year into her hands before the next conference in Lubbock, Texas that I went to. And Chet being my mentor all along in my writers group, I give all the credit to my writers group. San Diego Professional Writers Group, oldest writers group in San Diego. Now, to get back to your regular question, why write Westerns? Well, it's historical fiction. He's a frontiersman, but it's not really even in the mountains. Mm-hmm. It came from that dream.
Leading folks across the plains
and
wagon trains and such like that.
Exactly. The Cimarron Trail. And I just kept writing. And once I finished the first book, I knew that it would be there would be at least a second book, and then closing in on the second book, I knew that there would be a third book, and it came full circle, and became the trilogy. And I brought these along. This is Eye for an
Physical
Eye.
proof, right?
Physical
here.
proof, yeah. I'm just not talking out my butt, And this book here, he ends up going to Texas. And I had no idea that in 1836 was the Great Texas Revolution.
Yes.
So where would he naturally go?
Nothing but the Alamo.
Nothing but the Alamo. And this is all about his experiences with the. Really, he escapes from the Alamo. I had to get him out, to experience the rest of it, and write about all the way through Goliad, which is the Great Goliad Massacre. And then San Jacinto.
And San Jacinto, of course, yeah.
So, and then this is the culmination of his story, Blue Rivers of Heaven. This came out in September of 2022, last year.
So what do you think makes a good Western?
Good character. Good character, flawed character. Somebody
all
that
good characters are flawed characters.
You kind of want to root for, and then he does some things that you cringe. I've been told that Zeb is loyal to a fault. I think he is. Somebody a little outside the steps of society, so he keeps rubbing up against what would be considered the norm even in 1835, 36.
That's a pretty wide open field in that time period.
It is, yeah. And my books are not extremely violent, but they certainly tell the truth of the time. And
they were violent times.
They were, and there was, you had justice if you were on the right side of whoever had the power and the money. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, and I write about that. I write about the true intention of the Texas Revolution. The research that I found is slavery, and so that comes out. And I think a compelling story is really the conflict between the characters and what's going on around him. And other than that, I really don't have an answer. Well,
stories and characters are always what it's all based around. What gets you your overall ideas for it? You had a dream for the original story on all of this. What's kept you going on building the plot since then?
I would have to say a lot of it comes through research. Once I found out what was going on in New Orleans, I'll give you an example. Once I got into An Eye for an Eye, he ends up in St. Louis. And there's a character named Frenchie. These characters kind of fall in as I write. And I needed a beginning into this criminal world to find these two killers that killed his brother. It starts out with the bushwhacking and his brother's murder, and he's left for dead. And the first conflict that Zeb has is that he is saved by a Quaker doctor and his daughter, and they want him to stay there. And now he's got a conflict of whether to stay or go after the two men that murdered his brother. So he goes after the men, or else the idyllic life in lower Missouri, isn't much of a story. But he gets to St. Louis, and we meet a man named Frenchie who owns a bordello. It's called Frenchie's Emporium. And, I thought I knew who Frenchie was. The experiences, a couple of nights there, and then he ends up going on down to, he finds out that one of the killers is in New Orleans, so that's where he needs to go. And after he leaves St. Louis and gets to New Orleans, I was doing research on, just what New Orleans was like in 1835.
And the criminal structure of New Orleans.
Exactly.
1830. Extensive.
Yes.
Especially several blocks.
That's right. So I found this little article on Jean Lafitte. So there was a journal that was written. Now, some folks believe it was by him in St. Louis. Now, Jean Lafitte was supposed to have died off the coast of Santa Cruz in one of his pirate ships, right? You know who Jean Lafitte is. Hero of New Orleans. Yes. Yeah. And the most brutal pirate and slave trader, in the southern United States.
But still celebrated to this day.
Still celebrated to this day. But when I found out that he may have slipped off to St. Louis and lived this ulterior life, this other life, it dawned on me. That's Frenchie. Mm-hmm. Frenchie is indeed Jean Lafitte.
Nice.
And what that allowed me to do is develop the plot, the end of the story. And then it just fell in.
not just running a bordello, one of the most renowned people around anywhere at that time period. Very good.
And so I like, and it's through research and finding these little nuggets. Oh, okay. And, you know, the story's never written until the fingers do the flying, right? And once I realized that, then it fell into place. And in the second book, Frenchie doesn't show up, but he shows up prominently in the third book because Zeb has to go back to New Orleans and resolve some situations that were caused when he was there in the first place.
So when you write, do you have the reader in mind, or are you just writing your own stories that you feel need to be told on this?
I think I just want to tell a great story. I don't really think of the reader as much as that, just to tell a great story. I'm learning now. There's this thing called Save the Cat. It's like the latest writer's trend, of how to write the perfect novel. And I was watching a video yesterday, and there's 15 beats to a novel, and I'm familiar with this. And I had nothing like that. I wrote 3 books. You know, first one's an award-winning book, right? My first novel. And
nothing like starting at the top.
To great reviews. This one has Ann Hillerman gave me a blurb on this. Johnny Boggs, all the great top writers in America gave praise for this book. This book, second and third. Are there 15 beats in this? I could go back and analyze it. I will say this. I modeled these 3 books after The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I think I came close to that model, right?
Nice.
And so my motto has always been that it must ring true. If it rings true, and my research and the historical aspects of the time period are accurate, as accurate as I can get, then the reader will be swept up. If the dialogue is authentic, even the clothes are authentic, I think that, and it's written really well. I spent 6 years going to Barnes & Noble, buying two magazines, the Writer's Digest and the Writer's Magazine. That's how I learned how to write, and being in my writer's room. Read and critique, bring a chapter. And I read it, and they go, you know, if they're arguing about it, a certain line or paragraph, then I'm pretty good. But if they all agree it sucks, it needs to be rewritten. So I would go back and I would rewrite and edit and revise. I love to write. I will write till I die. I've found my calling.
Beyond what you thought it was.
Way beyond that I could ever imagine. There's no imagining this even in my late 40s, early 50s, until I really got into it. I knew that I had a book to write, the first book, and that I had already written some of the second book, because I remember the original project was the Tales of Zebadiah Creed. It was just some stories. I never conceived of actually writing a book until at that conference in 2014. I'm sitting having a drink with Tiffany Schofield in the bar, and she goes, "Oh, this is senior editor of 5 Star, a major publishing company. Just, do you think you can take that first story and turn it into a book?" I had like 30,000 words, right? I'm going, sure, I can do that.
Of course I can.
Of course I can. And by God, I did. I stood there. I sent her the final manuscript 3 days before I met her in Lubbock, Texas. I was not going to face her and say, Do you have the manuscript, Mark? And I said, no, not quite. You know, he says, no, it's in your inbox.
What do you think the most challenging thing about writing is?
Showing up.
So I was going to say finishing, but yeah, showing up is a distinct part of it.
Showing up every day and grinding it out sometimes.
Do you have a basic routine that you get into for writing, or basically always into?
When I'm writing, I like to write in the morning, and I get up and I do the Facebook scroll. I watch a little morning TV. I watch CBS Mornings, so I watch that. Here lately, I go exercise, and then I meditate. I'm a long-time meditator. I've been sitting for quite a few years. And I'd like to say I'm out at the little house. We turned a tough shed into an office, my wife and I. And I'm out there by 9:30, and usually write till about 11:30, 12, sometimes 1. I used to count my words, not so much anymore. I use my writers group and the commitment to having a chapter done. We meet every other Monday of the month, and so that propels me.
That keeps you moving forward.
Yeah, it really does.
Nothing like pressure.
Pressure, yeah, to get it done. And then, that's my normal routine if I'm on a roll. That's what I'd like to say I'm doing. Now, my fourth book that I'm writing now is Zeb is not a part of it. In fact, it's a standalone. Remember the song that I told you about?
Mm-hmm.
That I was going to turn into a play?
But working with your grandmother and
I'm writing that book
an
now.
outlaw in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm writing that book now.
Outstanding. That actually would be a good thing to come out about now. It's well timed.
Yeah, and it's the style is very different from these books. These books are written in first-person narrative, past tense. I'm writing present tense, close third, but I'm alternate time periods. Some of the chapters are in 1981. Some of when the women the sisters are older, and then I go back a couple of the chapters, several. In fact, I kind of want to create this balance of the 1920s and 30s when they're growing up and what happens to them as they become outlaws. The most famous outlaw sisters in Oklahoma for a time, and then they disappear. And what happens there, and how it affects them in 1981 when they're in their 70s.
And have families and have existed since then, and not the big blaze of glory of Hollywood.
No. It's and some people say, "Was your grandmother was a bank robber?" And I go, "No. This is that part of it's not true." However, I am using some of their, for instance, when they were young, my great-grandmother passed away, and my great-grandfather worked the railroad. He couldn't take care of 5 or 6 kids, so they all, for a while, scattered and were in foster homes. So some of that history is working its way into this book.
Nice.
And then I guess the premise is how desperate. What do you do in desperate times? And then say you're a road thief or whatever. There's a name for it. And then you realize you can make some quick money, right? And then it just escalates from there. It's caught up. You get caught up in it.
Until you're a band of outlaws running around.
Running around Oklahoma and robbing banks. And it's a real challenge because it's so different than with Zeb. I'm basically channeling Zeb, first person narrative. Everything about the book is written through his perspective. It's not this. I could not write a book like that with these 3 sisters. So, interesting challenge. My writers group, calls me out on a lot of things that, especially with POV, point of view. So, but I love it. I absolutely love it.
Being a woman of the 1930s is certainly a difficult thing to try and put yourself in.
It is. However, I figured that out. I'm the grandson who's writing about the three sisters. So I am actually the narrator telling their story. So I don't have to really go too close to how they would feel as three women.
And to an extent, you're telling the story that they told you, so it's open to whatever interpretation you want to at that point.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
That's a good element to have there. It covers lots of little problems.
Yeah, it does, as far as the actual craft of writing. So I'm really excited about this. So.
What is the best words of advice that you've gotten for writing?
Oh, show up, finish,
yeah.
Finish.
That's always the trick, isn't it?
It really is, and then let it go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm speaking, kind of channeling my own advice to myself, and in our writers group, we're all about getting our next writing published. And if you, the folks that come and they're kind of wavering, or they're just kind of floundering and don't forge ahead,
mm-hmm.
they don't stick around. They just don't. I mean,
it's a grind. It's work.
It's a grind. It is. And what you think is right and sounds good, it's not necessarily so. And you have to be willing to take strong advice and critique. And sometimes I sit there and grit my teeth and go, okay. But mainly, I think showing up and finishing, and being willing to revise, being willing to. This last book, Cengage, the large publisher, Cengage, Gale is one of the largest textbook publishers in the world. That's why they can finance these little books, and get hardcover library books out of them. So I'm not. Don't ever think. And another advice is, if you think you're going to make a living out of this, you're fooling yourself. I was going to say something.
Well, and it's hard work trying to get published, trying to get noticed, and then get a first book in, get a second book, third book, as you've gotten all in here. That's a lot of road. It seems like you made a lot of good contacts that at least were willing to stand by you in the character to keep you moving on.
Yeah.
And that's, for a lot of people, that's a rare thing to find.
Yeah. I'm really grateful for that dream. Because I wouldn't be sitting there talking to you if it had not been for that dream.
Well, we might be having a different conversation. Yeah, we're in the same town. It works.
That's right. We probably have the same friends.
Probably if we sat there and thought about it, we do run in some similar circles. Yeah,
that's right. So,
well, where can people learn more about you and get your books and all of that put together?
You can. My website is markcjacksonwriter.com. I've been fortunate. I've got a good publicist that's, I met through Western Writers, and so she's forced me into the social media and having to make sure I have a good website, keeping it up as best I can.
That's always work.
You can find me on Facebook, Mark C. Jackson. If you Google that, not only will my personal page come up, you can friend me. And I have an author's page, so I keep up. I also have Mark Jackson Band Facebook page. I think I've got. There was another site I had that on too. It wasn't Bandcamp; it was something else.
Yeah, Bandcamp. You can find all kinds of things.
Yeah. What else? One thing that my agent, publicity agent. I also have a literary agent too. That has helped. She's helped tremendously. You can just Google Mark C. Jackson.
Yeah.
I was able to capture that.
You own the name.
I own the name, at least for now. And last I checked, Google Mark C. Jackson, and my name would come up. And really, that's the best way to get a hold of me. Is do that.
A solid presence there and be able to go from there. Yes.
Yeah, all 3 books come up on my website. And a bunch of articles and some interviews. This interview would show up later. You guys posted. So,
yeah, fairly shortly.
Yeah, so that's the best way to get a hold of me. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming out here on a nice overcast, cloudy day and meeting with me.
Well, thank you for
appreciate
having
your
me.
voice being able to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's such an honor and pleasure.